leaving to Australia?
The Honourable Maurice Williamson.
Mr. Speaker, the Labor Party calling for a snap debate on the sale of land to foreigners is really like a turkey calling for an early Christmas, Mr. Speaker. It is just like mother's milk for the National Party because, frankly, sir, we on this side should be ashamed of our performance relative to Labor. Sir, during their time in office, when David Parker, the man who has just spoken, was Minister for Land Information over 9 long years, sir, that party approved the sale of 665,000 hectares of land to foreigners. 665,000 hectares of land to foreigners. And somehow now the national government, who in power for 3 3/4 years, has approved just on 100th, that's 1/6, actually it's more like about a 7th of what Labor did when they were in office. Somehow it's all wrong, it's evil, it's disgraceful, it's just outrageous. How many New Zealanders remember Shania Twain buying the South Island High Country estate? Right. And how many people remember the then Labor Prime Minister, Helen Clark, walking the track of the land with Shania Twain and welcoming the purchase? Right. Now, let's get some things into perspective here. The total Crafar farm land area was 7,000 hectares. If anyone wants to get that in perspective, it's about the size of a playing card on Eden Park as a percentage of total New Zealand land. So when you sit up and you stand at Eden Park watching the All Blacks play and you see a little white dot somewhere down on the field and you zoom right in on down to it and you find it's the Queen of Hearts, that's the equivalent piece of Crafar farmland relative to total landmass. But Shania Twain's land, 53,000 hectares, Mr. Speaker. 53,000 hectares sold to Shania Twain. Oh, was she a foreigner? Oh, well, she's from Canada. She now lives in Switzerland, I think. She's split the farm up with her ex-husband and he now takes control of it or whatever. But Helen Clark walked the track, was absolutely proud of the Labor government having sold this off to Shania Twain. And so many other sales of land occurred under that party. So now, sir, it comes time to look at the process, because the process was put in place not by the national government but by the Labor government. Because, sir, as Minister, I have to work under an act called the Overseas Investment Act, which was passed in 2005 by the Labor government. Now, I'm bound to act under that act. I know that David Parker wants ministers to break the law, but I've got some news for him. The advice is that if you don't act accordingly under the Act and the instructions that the Act gives you and the regs, you are subject to judicial review. And a buyer could easily say, well, I think the minister has breached the intents of the Act and the regulations, take us to judicial review, and the courts could easily find ministers have acted outside of it. Now, sir, David Parker's wrong on a number of counts. First of all, he says that we only rubber stamp advice we get. Well, let me give the member a good example. Officials recommended that the government say yes to Kim.com, buying of the Coatesville mansion. That is the official advice that ministers receive. But we declined it. And, sir, in a number of cases when we didn't think they were valid buyers of that land, such as Natural Dairy when they were wanting to buy it, that's the consortium headed up by May Wang, we declined it. We said no. But, sir, when my officials brought to me the advice about the Shanghai Pangshin bid, it's just impossible to go down the list of the criteria and not be impressed. First of all, what an incredibly successful company and companies Shanghai Pangshin is and has run. What a number of various industries, including retail, including construction and agribusinesses, that company has run. And when I hear people like Winston Peters saying, oh, well, Shanghai Pangshin doesn't have any experience of dairy farming, well, let's have a look at it. Alan Crafar did. And how did he go running the place? Okay, he knew how to milk a cow. And was it a successful operation? I'm not so sure. Now, I agree that the principal owner of Shanghai Punction may not have put on the cups, washed down the udders and put on the cups. I agree with that. But he has proven that he has a very successful track record in agribusiness, along with a number of others. And then there was the good character test. Now, in many cases, it's quite easy. You've got someone who's got a bit of a dodgy background or got convictions or whatever. This, sir, was a clean slate. Clean slate for good character test. So you couldn't do it on that. Then we get to the economic acumen. Now, sir, in the past, and I want members to really focus on this, ministers, since the Act was put in place, have always used the before and after test. That is, what would be the value of this asset before the investment was made, and what will be the value of this investment after? That's the test that David Parker used over and over again, because I've checked with the officials who were the same officials that worked under Labor. We always used the before and after. But somehow, a High Court judge told us we were wrong. Justice Forrie Miller said, no, ministers have misdirected themselves, should not use a before and after. They should use a with and without test. That is, what is the value of the asset with this investment, and what would be the value of this asset without the investment being made? Now, it's quite difficult to do, sir, because the without is billions of combinatorics. Who knows what would happen to the investment the asset without the investment? Who knows? It could be the best dairy farmer the world's ever seen buy it, and it might be the most flourishing set of farms ever, or it might be another Alan Crafar that buys it, or anything in between. But, sir, we took the advice of the High Court, we went back and we applied the with and without test. And, sir, after being challenged again in the High Court, to the Court of Appeal, I'm delighted to say the Court of Appeal found in favour that ministers had acted properly and had approved the sale under the Act. Now, let's get it quite clear, sir. This Act was put in place by Labor. So you can't start blaming the National Government for the Act. And indeed, you can't even blame the National Government for the regulations in place, because National added some more. We didn't delete any. We left all the regulations that are under the Overseas Investment Act in place and added 2 new ones after we did a review. One was an economic interest test, factors allowing ministers to consider whether New Zealand's economic interests are adequately safeguarded and promoted. That was the first extra test we added. And a second one was a new mitigating factor which enables ministers to consider whether an overseas investment provided opportunities for New Zealand oversight or involvement. Well, this one does. This is going to be a joint partnership with Landcorp. Landcorp's going to have a lot of its expertise involved in that. And now, sir, I get to the point which I find really laughable. We're supposedly now selling off all our country. You listen to Russell Norman from the Greens, who himself has only come here recently from Australia, so I find it a bit rich that he is saying we don't want foreigners to take over our land. But you listen to Russell Norman, you would think that the vast bulk of this country now lay in the hands of foreigners. Well, sir, I can do nothing but thank the Sunday Star Times, because it did a fantastic big expose of this a couple of weeks ago in July, in which they showed a huge piece of the pie, and that says, how much land are foreigners gobbling up? And most people say, oh, well, it's most of our country, you know, we're becoming tenants in our own land, it's all going. And then, sir, Terralink, no, the Prime Minister said he did not want to be a tenant in his own land, so let's get the facts right. All the Terralink database got used to show that total farmland, total rural land in this country, 1.5% is owned by foreigners. Right, 1.5%. And sir, and by the way, what's really interesting if you follow this, in many cases what was a foreigner turns into being a New Zealander, because a lot of people who buy the land as foreign then take out citizenship. I've got a number of examples who are now New Zealand citizens. as I presume Russell Norman is, because he's able to stand for Parliament. And therefore he could have bought something as an Australian but now become a New Zealand citizen. And Sarah, I've seen that as well. So I'd really like to know what the definition of a foreigner is, because it may be someone who came from overseas but now holds it. But I repeat again, for anybody who wants to look at that article, it's a very good article showing both the North Island and the South Island graphically. 1.5% of all rural farmland, sir, in this country is owned by foreigners. So now, let's go back and get it as a recap. Because again, I can't believe Labor called for a snap debate on this. They sold, well, no, I haven't made the point enough. I want to make it more times than the once. I really do. I know that Labor think I've made the point, but I really think 665,000 hectares of land sold under Labor. Remember, Crafar's was 6,000, so it's about 100th of what Labor approved for sale. There you go, there's a good number. The total 16 Crafar farms added together come to 100th of the land area that Labor approved for sale to foreigners. Boy, does that put it in perspective, doesn't it? I think that really no wonder they don't want us to carry on. I think we should move an extension of time at this debate, because, sir, we're loving it. We are loving having a debate on sale of land to foreigners. Now, I know what Labor's going to do. I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to do what they did with sale of assets. They're going to say, oh, well, we got that wrong. We got that wrong. You know, I know we sold telecom and we sold a whole lot of assets, but we were wrong. And now I hear today about Housing Corp. You know, oh, you haven't done any maintenance on this and you haven't done any. And then Phil Heatley, the Minister of Housing, gets up and said, well, this is how much maintenance we've actually done, and compared to them, it's huge. And then you go, oh, well, we got that wrong as well. And you start wondering, how many times can Labor actually run the line, we got it wrong, until New Zealanders say, what did you ever get right? What did you ever get right? Because again, on foreign ownership, we got that wrong, says Labor. We got it wrong. We shouldn't have sold all that land. We shouldn't have sold to Shania Twain. I notice they never said a mutter, not a murmur, not a whisper when James Cameron came in to buy some land in the Wairarapa recently. Oh, he's a good guy, actually, this James Cameron. He's a Canadian. He's not a foreigner. He's not a foreigner. He's a Canadian. Not a mutter, not a murmur, not a whisper about James Cameron. Oh, no. And, sir, the Swiss and the Germans and the British and the French and even Australian buyers that have come in here without a mutter, not a murmur, not a whisper. And I say to my colleague Raymond Ho, who I think is a shadow for me in this portfolio, you need to speak up, Mr. Ho. You need to speak up a little bit about how poor this decision... No, he is. He's still in Parliament. That's him over there. And he is my opponent, I believe, in the land portfolio. Is that right? Land information, spokesman? Yeah. I think I might have got this wrong. I think I might have got this one wrong. But I didn't hear a mutter or a murmur or a whisper from him about his own ethnic community. Because, sir, we need foreign investment in this country. New Zealand cannot function without foreign investment. There is, sir, a very, very good article in the New Zealand Herald of about 2 years ago that was written by Gareth Morgan. And I think it should be compulsory reading for all New Zealanders, because this is what it says, sir. It says that while we continue to spend more money overseas than we earn, and foreigners are left with a surplus of that transaction in their hands, there's only two things they can do with that surplus. They can dump that money on the junk bond market and send our dollar to 1 cent, or they can do what just about anybody in this room would do. They'd buy an asset with it. And as Gareth Morgan said, for those people in this House, as I think for all those people in the country, but in the House today, who are opposed to foreign investment, tell us how on earth you've got a plan for New Zealand to stop spending more than it earns. Because I don't envisage that happening in my lifetime. I don't envisage it happening in a fairly long time. I wish it did. I wish that we were a more prosperous nation, that New Zealanders' spending appetite wasn't so voracious. But I'm sorry, Gareth Morgan's right. Foreign investment is actually going to help this nation. Some of the investment made by Shanghai Pengxin will bear fruits as we get better penetration into the Chinese retail market by partnering with companies like that. And, sir, I just repeat again, it is almost, I mean, I'm almost having to go and get a bit of a reality check here. I could understand why, say, the Communist Party of New Zealand would be opposed to this. I don't know what their policy is. No, the Greens haven't been quite that consistent either. There's not been a lot of words about some of it, but others. But, sir, when a party that was in government for 9 long years sold 6.5, 7 times as much as the national government get, all I can say is my ghast is really flabbered.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on this urgent debate.